and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Amna Shabbir. Dr. Shabbir is a TEDx speaker, a top podcast host, a dual board certified physician with advanced training in integrative well being, performance, and leadership development. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Amna Shabbir.
Thank you for having me, Courtney. It's an absolute delight to be here and to be in the presence of your positivity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabbir. I am absolutely thrilled to have you on the podcast. I first want to say a big congratulations to you on completing your first TEDx talk.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your support and watching, and I'm so glad to hear that the message resonated with you. It's really that is the goal. That's the goal, impact and reaching out to other humans. I'm so happy about that.
No, absolutely. And perfectionism. We were just speaking about this before we started, but I certainly got introduced to this concept, if you will, in the sport of gymnastics. So, not just within sport, but I would also take it into my professional career. So, I cannot wait to jump right into this topic of discussion today. So, let's go ahead and begin with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Yeah, you shared some really kind words. So I'm a physician. I'm a behavior change specialist. I also embrace the title of super mom because that doesn't make it to the resume. And I have realized in 2025 that I am a creative at heart, and that has been a little bit of a disturbing revelation because when you look at the world of perfectionism, it's just easier to describe those other roles and titles. But these days, I feel like I'm a creative at heart, and the topic of perfectionism fascinates me. What I love to do as with all these roles is really to help high achievers create no BS sustainable well-being, something that feels good. It feels like you can actually do instead of gaslighting yourself. So that's a little bit about me.
I love everything about this and exactly what I was saying. I want to dive right into your TEDx, just the journey in general. So, leading up to this TEDx talk, if you could share the journey, but then also why did you specifically choose perfectionism as the main topic of discussion?
It's like Steve Jobs said that you only connect the dots looking backwards. So I went through my medical education journey. I went through practicing traditional primary care at a large academic center. After that, I went back for a fellowship in geriatric medicine. Then I continued my clinical work. I launched entrepreneurship. I got all my certifications surrounding behavior change. And I still did not feel good. I still felt incomplete. I felt not enough. I felt never enough. And that really pulled at me on a deeper level that, I've done so much healing work and I'm helping other people. And yes, I am helping them and they are feeling better, but there's something missing. And so I had to reflect backwards and realize that fundamentally, the common thread from how I have felt since a young child, it has been this relentless pursuit of perfection and perfectionism as a whole. And so that really allowed me a moment to pause. And then I just got really curious because and why is this impacting me at such a deeper level? Is this an experience that I am having? Is this a unique experience that I'm having? So I got super interested in those questions. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm really interested in learning more about this. What better way to learn more than by going to super smart humans that have actually done lab research, that have written books, that identify as high achievers, that are like me, people inside the field of medicine, outside the field of medicine. So I started interviewing individuals, and then I said, okay, maybe if I'm curious enough, maybe at some point I'll write a book about this. But let's just see. So that's where that uncomfortable creative space started to enter in my life, where it wasn't like, okay, when I get done with this, I'll get this degree. Or when I get done with this, like this will be my role or title. That's what creativity does. You have to sort of the cliche is true, lose yourself in it. And so I started interviewing individuals and I got super interested. I launched my podcast in this process. If you go back and listen to some of the first interviews, the intention was not for those interviews to actually be aired on the podcast. So I was like, okay, now this is me challenging my perfectionism out loud. And one of the biggest, most courageous things that I could have ever done was just screaming on the internet. I didn't scream, but putting it out there in a LinkedIn post. I'm working on my book and not having a date on it. Like this is really in the book proposal phase right now, and I'm being very open about it. The old me would have just said, "This is it. This is when the book is launching. This is or the deal's finalized." So being in that creative space and during this entire time, the more I talked to these high achievers, the more I realized the deep rooted impact perfectionism was having across the board. And during these moments, I had reflections of my own come up on how it was showing up, not just in me, but also my daughter, my children. So in that moment, I asked myself, this is a message that is clearly, it has become deeply important. It is a message that I not just I value, but a lot of people really need to hear. So how can we create impact? And so the word that's been on my mind really has been impact. And that's where TEDx came. And that's a really long answer to your question. That's where TEDx came. And so it is a wonderful platform in which to just come with the idea. And that's um, I thought I dared myself to have the audacity to attempt this, and I'm grateful that I did.
I love that you share your whole journey. And when I was listening to this TEDx talk, you speak specifically about three types of perfectionism. So if you could please elaborate on those three types of perfectionism.
Yeah, I, like many others, had heard the terms maladaptive and adaptive perfectionism. And when you are working in the confines of medicine and healthcare, there is no room for error. There is no room for error. So um, I had this fascination and this idea that perfectionism is actually a good thing, or maybe it's not really a good thing, but it is a good thing, right? That's how we all feel. And many people listening to this conversation are actively thinking, okay, lady, you are telling me that perfectionism is a bad thing, but the society is not ready for me to admit that it is not a bad thing, really. We are glorifying it. And so I had to go and look for deeper meaning in the terms, and maladaptive and adaptive perfectionism was really not cutting it for me. And so I love to follow the work that is done by Doctors Hewitt. And so the way they have defined are these three types or domains of perfectionism. Number one being self-oriented, which is I must be perfect. It's an internal drive. The second type is other-oriented perfectionism. I expect others around my orbit to be perfect. My children, my spouse, other people around me. And then the last component, which I found really fascinating, was socially prescribed perfectionism, which is that everyone in this world, people that are strangers that I've never met, strangers online, random people in my culture and society, they all expect me to be flawless. And when we look at these three types of perfectionism, the reason I like to talk about these three types is because they add way more context than when you just talk about maladaptive and adaptive. Because when I say maladaptive and adaptive, primarily what a lot of people in the audience will get to hear, unless you're an actual perfectionism researcher in the lab, is it's a me problem. Courtney, you need to go and release your perfectionistic identity, and you need to work on your perfectionistic strivings. But when you say, okay, they're self oriented, other oriented, socially prescribed, it adds so much more richness. And you realize that, oh, maybe the way Courtney feels right now is because that that perfectionism was necessary to survive as a gymnast. That was expected. That was other oriented. That was socially prescribed. I have imbibed all of that. And so in that moment, just the awareness adds a little bit of relief. And I love the research that's done by Dr. Curran, Thomas Curran, who I also interviewed on my podcast in this process. He has done lab research on this and he has worked. And so some of the things when you talk about it in that manner, they're not very popular. It's not popular to say perfectionism is just not a you problem, because we like to gaslight each other. And marketing, that's a concept I introduce in my TEDx talk, which is the expectation gap of perfectionism, which is the space between who you think, who you truly are, and what the world expects of you. And that's really where all marketing lies, right? There are billions of dollars that are being spent to make you feel the way you feel. And so when we remove context of these three types of perfectionism, what is left is just you. And you need to go and you need to do an enormous amount of yoga and meditation. And when you come back and you still feel like, wow, my perfectionism hasn't left me, what do I do now? That's the reason I like to lean into this context.
Wow, I love everything about what you just said. I was thinking about so many different aspects of life. Like, so for example, now since gymnastics is behind me, but focusing so much on career, but just like you said, there's so much depth to perfectionism and all of those concepts that you just went through. It made me think about not only in the context of like one's career, but like you said, the people surrounding you, how your thought process could actually influence like what's around, like you said, whether it's a spouse, a friend, like, why aren't you doing this perfect, and yet they're doing it perfectly fine, but within your mind you're so fixated on perfectionism. And we were discussing this, it's the truth. I feel specifically within the sport of gymnastics, striving for those perfect scores and being able to translate that. I think that there was a pro being able to translate that into professional career. So always striving to do your very best, of course. But then we've also spoke about where it could hinder. I mean, literally, Dr. Shabbir, to send an email sometimes, it takes me forever because you're constantly thinking like, no, let me just look one more time. And it can, I think that there's so much depth to perfectionism. And so my question to you is differentiating between like male and female, does perfectionism actually affect either one differently, or is it the same?
That's an excellent question. And to your earlier point, Courtney, I would also add that rereading the email, that is intense impression management, that you always like have to show up a certain way, right? And that's also a great point of reflection for all of us to think about, where is people pleasing and boundary setting or lack of boundary setting is showing up in that email domain, like you wanting to show as like, I want to get my message across, but really also sound like warm and polite, but also determined and confident, which just merges into that next part, which is like, is there a difference between the way, are there gender differences when we talk about, perfectionism? So we can look at it, break it down into like professional settings and just social settings, such as social media, for example. So in professional settings, studies show that women tend to display higher socially prescribed perfectionism. This is, again, work done by Dr. Kern. Like the belief is that others expect them to be perfect to be accepted. And so the socially prescribed part will be dialed up. And that is, linked with maladaptive psychological distress, things like anxiety, depression. We're not just talking about soft things here. So a lot of people will hear these words and they'll say, oh, they're talking about soft skills. These are things that are actually harming your mental health and your physical self. Then, when we move towards men, they will exhibit more self oriented perfectionism, which is tied to like mastery and control. So, and then when we just step back and we're talking in the context of socially prescribed perfectionism, we know that the social expectations for women are different. I'm talking through about my experience through my lens as a South Asian woman. I never led with that identity, I guess, for the longest time ever. And ever since I have realized that, yeah, it is a part of who I am. And there's a whole different layer that shows up. We are pressured, women at large are pressured to be competent and likable. Men are expected to perform things that are flawlessly done, but also to suppress vulnerability and not ask for help. And imagine the kind of distress that creates, right? On the other side, as a woman, if you do ask for help in a professional setting, the question becomes, are you cut out for this? And you also will then dial up your own imposterism. I don't like to use the word imposter syndrome because it makes it sound like an illness, but imposterism will go up. Okay, so this is what we're talking about in just like the professional space. Let's
Mhm.
step back and think about social media. In social media spaces, research does show that women faced more like appearance-based perfectionism. How do I look? And how curated is my feed, where men are facing more like achievement based perfectionism. How great is that LinkedIn scroll looking, right? All your titles, all of those things. So both of these experiences will create this comparison driven self evaluation and this pressure to consistently like curate success, but all in the wrong way.
See, I think that's so interesting when you speak about social media and the difference. When you were talking about men and that sense of mastery, that sense of achievement, but then on the female side, you're right, whether it's as shallow as looks, whether it's just the way that we portray. And that's my next question is, it's really interesting when I'm on social media, especially LinkedIn, so obviously more business, more career directed, but there's this discussion about authenticity, about being your true authentic self, right? And then on the same side of the coin, it's like you see so much perfectionism. I mean, very rarely, I think it's just human nature. Who really wants to put themselves out there and talk about like their greatest mistake, that they've, had in their life? I don't think anybody really wants to do that. But I'm just trying to understand when we talk about like, coming or coming forth with your true authentic self, where is this line drawn to where we could kind of have both, where like we're not striving for sheer perfectionism and my life so perfect, but yet we could still be literally authentic when we do bring our authentic self present, and forward. So could you maybe just speak about both of those words, perfectionism and authentic self?
Another great question. And because social media is giving us double messages, and I love the word authenticity because it's a beautiful word, and I love the word vulnerability because both of them are great words, and yet they're overused, misunderstood, um, and I don't even know what they mean anymore. Sometimes I wonder because they're like labels, and again, those words will remove context. My true self, my authentic self might look different at different times. I sometimes like to wear pearls, and people around me would think that's really uncool that I like to wear pearls. But I'm also a geriatrician, so there are elements of my being. So social media does not allow for deeper connection, and so people are making snap judgments right there and then. I have had to really get clear on what, as Simon Sinek says, like, what is my why for being present on social media? And I am that person who likes to get dressed up sometimes and does not like to get dressed up at all. Like today, my hair are not like done. This is shower dried hair. And I am fine recording this amazing podcast with you. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that would not have been the case. There would have been a lot of anxiety, like small appearance based things. But my why today is to really talk about this important topic that we're talking about. I have intense like hosting anxiety, and like people put things afterwards online, and that was driven from this expectation that when you host, like from the forks to the spoons to everything has to look a certain way. We're recording around holiday season right now. I can only imagine what people are going to be going through, and then what are their feeds going to look like. So I think it's really important to be aware, and I think we are aware, but then we forget because that's how overstimulated we are. So just from putting on my like behavior change specialist hat or like my physician hat, I
Mhm.
encourage all of us to take social media breaks. Screen time itself is not doing great. This is not any like new thing that I'm sharing, but I will say that every time I have stepped away, I have reconnected, and I've taken like long social media breaks. Like sometimes I've gone offline for 4 weeks. Sometimes I've gone offline longer than that, but true social media sabbaticals, I'm trying to like incorporate them because there's a moment like burnout starts to set in, and then you don't even know like what am I doing here. So I think you have to ask yourself, what is the word authentic mean to me? today, this week, right now, because you are a human being, you're evolving. Maybe I don't like pearls in a couple of months. I don't know. So far, that's not been true. But I'm allowing myself that possibility. And it's really hard when we're in that space of perfectionism, the rigidity will set in. Like, to the point where even when we talk about values, well, this now I got a set of values. Now I'm going to rigidly hold on to them. Like being authentic is a value. Am I being authentic? Well, when you're being like so inflexible, are you being authentic? So just some thoughts to allow yourself to think when you are showing up online. Why am I showing up? What's the purpose? Am I having fun? Um, am I like, is this a frivolous post? And that's okay. All like there's no judgment tied to whatever you're trying to do. Authenticity is when you don't feel this restless need for external validation. Like when my vanity metrics are met, or so and so is like envious, resentful of me, or something else happens, like that is, in my opinion, like that is what authenticity feels in my body, where I'm not restlessly striving for external validation.
That's so true. And we talk about like one's authentic self, of being true to who you are, regardless of what maybe others will say. And that's not to say like, oh, I don't care what others say. I do. But I think to a certain extent about allowing yourself to go down these paths that are not necessarily like what is the norm, so to speak. And so it just does, it kind of ties back to like following your true authentic self, authentic like nature, to go down these paths that are maybe more quote unconventional. With perfectionism, my question for you is there actually physical harm associated with perfectionism?
Yeah, Courtney, great question and reflection. Because when we are in that mode of perfectionism, we're also like going and delving into extreme like binary thinking, black and white thinking. Either this has to be perfect or it is absolutely not going to work out. And that can be very detrimental to your mental health. So when we step back and we look at perfectionism, and I said that this is not fluff, like this is conversations. In my talk, I did call it with a grain of salt. Like I called it a public health crisis likely happening, unfolding in front of our eyes. So when we step back and look at what it's doing, for me, health is health. And I say that wholeheartedly as a physician, as somebody who's struggled with mental health and physical health challenges. They both are connected. It's not like you put your mind away and leave it somewhere while you go and you work on your physical stuff. So it's all interconnected. We have to look at ourselves as interconnected beings. And when you talked about your walk, another thing that came to my mind was like how disembodied we are. So we're always thinking, we forget our bodies. So we're not living in an embodied way. So health and mental health and everything wise, like when you step back, perfectionism has been shown to be a transdiagnostic risk factor for many mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, eating disorders, chronic loneliness, burnout. And so that's just to name a few. Then when we look at our physical health, it tends to like alter, studies show, our cortisol rhythms, that is the stress hormone. It leads to insomnia. We know sleep is really important. It's all the rave these days. And so knowing that. And then of course, like there are also studies that are saying that there's potentially even increases our chance for chronic inflammation. Now, to me, it makes perfect sense when you look at yourself as a human, an interconnected being. Who you are is connected to how people are perceiving you, and how you think, more how you think people are perceiving you, the expectations of you, and then how is that translating into your actual physical and mental health. I have felt both of those experiences, and there came a really, really dark point in my life, which I never dared myself to talk about till I got on the TEDx stage. And you can't really give warnings on the TEDx stage. So I had to like, the story that I talk about, the first one, about me being at a red light, I was actually actively having thoughts of hurting myself at that point. And so I wanted to like, if for others that need to seek help, 988 is the number to call if this triggers something in you. But I mean, I never had the courage to share that. And for me, it had gotten so bad. And perfectionism was preventing me from asking for help because that meant accepting I was a human being who had needs, who was struggling, postpartum with all the things, sleep deprived, everything. Like, so what it does is, in essence, it impacts your mind, your body, your community, and it makes help inaccessible.
And as you speak, I it made me think about, is perfectionism, is it something that you're seeing that's actually getting worse? Like, does social media and does it impact or amplify perfectionism? Since it's really, because I say this because we all came upon, I feel like, social media at different times, especially within different generations. But even with younger generations coming up, like, what are you seeing right now with perfectionism, maybe in Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Is it getting worse even for like millennials? Like, are you seeing something as far as just trends and patterns?
Yeah, when researchers look at large what has happened over decades to perfectionism, it has all three types have gone up. So across the board, they have gone up, especially for younger adults, they've gone up, especially socially prescribed perfectionism has gone up. So it is increasing, and it's hard to not say that social media is not tying into it, right? Body dysmorphia is another thing that's happening. And so there is a lot that's happening in context of this increase, and that's why it's concerning. And when you step away and we're talking about younger generations, there are other things happening at the same time, right? There is also, I'm forgetting the exact source of where I read it. It's in my mind, might have to retrieve it later. But we're also in the mid a purposelessness epidemic that's happening among younger adults, where when I step away and I can completely relate with it. The striving is solely towards how I appear to the outside world, my performance based identity, not my values based identity. So as a young adult, I'm supposed to look flawless, have flawless academic records, or like whatever sports I'm dealing with, whatever it is. It has to not be it has to be perfect, and it has to be over and above. And so that is one part of it. And then there's this other part of it in which we're also going through like loneliness and purposelessness, which is tied to what I feel is like the absence of things like community building, volunteerism. And so that has been actually a point that I've been trying to incorporate more for my own children, being present in the community, being present in nature, being present where you are at, and not just in these like online spaces. I love the work done both by Jennifer Wallace as well as Jonathan Haidt. You know, they've talked about these important things in their books and their body of work. So there is optimism as we openly talk about these things. I'm not all into doom and gloom, but it's really critical for us to get very serious and actually examine what's happening. You know, James Baldwin's saying always comes to my mind when I talk about this. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced.
Ooh, that is powerful. So when it comes to upbringing, it reminds me, like, I was just thinking about even my life in reflection of where perhaps my like perfectionism came from. And I don't think it was so much my father, almost at all, quite frankly. I mean, he was never on me about like, you have to have straight A's or anything. I never felt that sense of, in order to impress dad, if you will, I had to achieve such high marks. Where I saw it come into play was definitely sport. I do. I think that's where, like, subconsciously, it was probably like within my mind. But I ask this next question: do you think that perfectionism stems from maybe one's upbringing, or is it more of just maybe like general environment, like sports or like extracurricular activities, friends, and so forth, not just within like the parents and how they're raising children?
Yeah. When you share your dad's example, Courtney, I thought of the example I talk about in my TEDx talk, which with my daughter, and I have not put any pressure on her. And I've actually tried to be really good. And that was the impetus for me actually studying perfectionism further. Like, what is going on? I am being so supportive and so nice. And like, where is this coming from? And so researchers find that younger and younger kids, elementary school kids, are becoming distressed when they don't score perfect scores. And so it is alarming. And so when we step away, I think it is an amalgamation of genetics, but modern perfectionism, I think, is more of a social phenomena. And so it is layer on layer. Would I say like, okay, this is exactly where it's coming from? It's very hard to piece that out, right? So I think it's layer on layer. It's multiple things together. I do want to take a moment over here, and because at this point in the conversation, some people are really, they're concerned, they're uncomfortable. This is the moment that I would like to unpack the difference and the confusion between what people think perfectionism is and what it really is. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, what is perfectionism? I just my gosh. This is really good. Like when you really stop and think about a concept that you feel like you know inside and out, but like as far as the definition, you know, I'd have to speak probably just from like experience, not like an exact definition, but I think in my mind it's achieving excellence to maybe receive a response from others in return. So for example, like growing up, always wanted to do well to impress dad and to get that like great job, Court, and that's what kept me going. So I would continue to raise the bar, I think, in my head growing up. Now in my adulthood, it's not that it's like never enough, but I find myself when you reach certain accolades or certain degrees and you get there and you're like okay,
Yeah.
what now? And so I don't know how to explain that part, but that's where the perfection, like you have to obtain terminal degrees, you have to keep amping it up, but it's never enough. So I don't know if that even
That
remotely answers your
I
question.
love that answer because it really brings me into like I would love to share with the audience tuning in like some of the misconceptions that I fell on as we talk about like perfectionism and success, right? So what you talked about, you used the word excellence in there. And I'm loving this word more and more as this journey is unfolding. And that is what we confuse. The part of external validation is absolutely correct. The part about persistently feeling inadequate is correct. What I, like to say, it's this dull ache of consistent comparison and inferiority, and you can't get rid of that dull ache, and that is this feeling that I'm always going to be perpetually inadequate. And that's where the concept that I created about the perfectionism, the expectation gap of perfectionism comes in, because you're never going to be able to bridge that gap, and so you're always going to perpetually feel that way. So what are some of the misconceptions audience members might have? Is like perfectionism is necessary for success. What is this lady talking about? If I let go of my perfectionism, here's how I interpreted it. If I let go of my perfectionism, I'm going to be face down on the couch in potato chips with my career ended. That's not what happened. So, perfectionism is very different than what is healthy striving or than what is excellencism, which is such a great term, because the energy is very different. Perfectionists operate from a deficit mindset. They think there's something wrong with them and they have to meet this expectation. And then when everything will be perfect, then they will be enough. So the whole time when you're trying to build this flawless persona, you're going to consistently operate from this deficit feeling, like a fear that I have to hide my flaws. And it's not the same as excellencism, which is like, I want to grow. I want to be excellent. I want to have ambition. I want to have drive. I want to do all of this. And it's beautiful that you want to go and achieve and do all of that. I'm not telling you to settle for mediocrity here. I am just telling you this is very different energy. Now, if I lean into the concept of excellence and having high standards, or like I want to do the best I want for my clients when I'm working with them, I'm not going to say, yeah, I want to do, this much is good. It's okay. I guess that's good enough. No, I want to have that ambition and drive. That's great because I want to. And as part of that process, I will fail. I will grow. I will not know everything on day one. Whereas when we talk about perfectionism, it's about I have to look perfect on day one. I have to know everything on day one. And I don't want anyone to find out that I'm a fraud. So there's no like, I can't show people my learning journey. There is no growth curve. So when we can step back and really define what it is that we're dealing with, then
Mhm.
we can all take a collective deep breath. And so it is excellence is driven by internal motivation, and healthy striving is driven by internal motivation. Perfectionism is driven by absolute fear and deficiency. So when we step away and truly double click and recognize, then we can allow ourselves to operate with letting go of some of this stuff. And it's a journey. It's also the other misconception people have is as if there's some invisible line you and I crossed. And after that, we became experts and we were healed, and our life is great, and nothing ever will come back to us. The day I was giving the TEDx talk on perfectionism was the day I needed my talk the most. It was amazing. And so I literally told myself that this is a moment for me to lean in and anchor myself into the solutions that I'm trying to offer other people, as well as like a reminder to reground myself. I don't like to appear that I have like I'm recovered and this is done, because that's just not wrong, and that's not how healing journeys work. That's not how humanity works, and that just feeds into how we gaslight each other.
This is such, I love this conversation because it allows me to just to reflect upon this concept that I've certainly lived with, but you mentioned something that made me think about when my path for gymnastics and for school, there was a quote endpoint, whether it was a terminal degree, whether it was becoming an elite level gymnast, but you knew what the end would be. And I think that as you strive for that sense of, I guess, perfectionism, along the way, I reflect upon it was like a fear. It was a fear based of what if I don't achieve that? And so I utilized it. I guess it could be more in a positive way for perfectionism that it motivated me each and every day. I was going to ensure that I made it. And so, therefore, my hard work, whether it was waking up a little bit earlier, studying more for a test, whether it was working out, but then maybe doing a little bit more conditioning or something to be more stronger, but then afterwards, what's interesting, because you mentioned the word energy. And once I was done with like academia, as far as like the program of a PhD, I moved forward, and plenty of positivity has given me so much energy. And it's so interesting because I was comparing it and I said, what is actually different from the Courtney self that was really heavily in academia in the program? I still teach now, but my point was, I feel when I have the mission, I have the vision, I certainly have my goals, but it's not a accepted end goal, if that makes sense. So it makes the journey more enjoyable. That even if we talk about perfectionism and on the podcast, I have to laugh when you were talking about, starting your podcast, because I talk about it all the time. I was at a point where I I was going to go for it regardless. And so, yes, when I look back, my guests have been fantastic. But when I was really studying myself to become a better host, I was like, oh, Dr. Shamir, I couldn't even listen to myself. It's nails on a chalkboard, you know? But at the same time, it was enjoyable. And I didn't worry about as much of perfectionism down this journey. And so I'm just curious, from your perspective, from what you're hearing me talk about with like definitive goals that other people accept and they understand, versus one doing a journey that there's not, quote, an end goal that we're all accepting, if you will. Is there any difference with the concept of perfectionism with that?
I loved so much from your reflections at like what you just shared, and the two thoughts that come to my mind is one is this recognition that when are you going to truly enjoy this? As you mentioned, the journey, and a quick sidetrack to the podcast, but I drove my team wild by listening to the audio a few times. And then I said, I can still hear static. Something's not right. Oh my goodness, it was hilarious. So I openly and thank you to them for being so patient with me in that process. It's this recognition. Am I like that right now after like, it launched this year and I already feel so much more comfortable, so much more better, a little bit less of the other oriented perfectionist. So two things. When are you going to actually derive joy? So, a lot of times, this is why it gets harder. It's like that saying goes, what got you here won't get you there. If this worked for you at some point, this pursuit worked for you, I would still challenge you that the parts that worked for you were working not for perfectionism, but from excellencism. You were so meticulous, so disciplined from a space of like, yeah, I want to be there. And yet, fear can be a great motivator for short periods of time. I'm tired of beating myself up after a while because that's the other point. How long can you beat yourself up? How long can you be self critical? It is exhausting, it's tiring, it takes a toll on you. And we know perfectionists are low on self compassion and high in self criticism. So, when are you going to start enjoying the journey? Is it when you're going to hit the goal? Or is it when you're going to start the process of dreaming about the podcast? Is it when it's going to have an infinite number of downloads? Like when is enough going to show up for you? And that is a struggle that perfectionists will have. But if I say that I am embracing the journey and I want to be the best podcast host I can be and make this something that is worthwhile for my audience members, that is such a more enjoyable space to be in. And that does not actually lower your standards. You're not putting out bad content. You're actually working hard towards that goal, but the energy shifts and you can start deriving joy faster than that proverbial line that keeps moving, the horizon that you're never going to reach. And then I absolutely, absolutely will anchor this reminder for everyone that you're not going to try different things, creative things, scary things like entrepreneurship, or just even your regular day job from a space of self criticism. You can only yell at yourself for so long. You can only beat yourself up for so long. It gets exhausting. It gets tiring. You will burn out. And yes, self compassion and loving yourself will lead to more productive outcomes. I don't like the word productive, but yes, it does lead to more productive outcomes. Dr. Kristen Neff's work has repeatedly shown us that self compassion will give you better physiology. Your body will be better. Your mental health will be better. And as a consequence, your motivation levels will be more. You will actually procrastinate less. And so all of this is important, but as a perfectionist, even if you make a slight rigid like wrong turn from whatever you had in your mind, your checklist doesn't go as planned, you're going to be extremely self-critical. I was giving a talk on perfectionism and I was about to explain this concept. And I think I coughed or something happened, and it was a very respectable venue with a lot of amazing high achieving women in the audience. And my brain quickly went like, oh my god, I can't believe you just said and you just coughed like back to back. And then I had to share that with the audience, like in full, like for me that felt like a natural authentic moment to let everyone know like this is what my brain was doing just now. And because I can catch it and I have so much more awareness, the hold that it has on me is so much less.
That is so true. So, like, in a similar context, when I'm reviewing podcast, you're right. I will catch myself if it's like a or a like, but in my mind, it's amplified. It's the first thing that I hear. But when I ask even like my best friend, just for some feedback that I could trust, they're like, I've never really thought about it so hard. Like if it was such a big deal, I would tell you. And sure, I probably do say it. I know I say it, but I think it is to that point that we internalize sometimes things that are in our minds, it's amplified, it's so loud. But then to other people, it's not even necessary. What do you mean? Like, unless I really think about it, Courtney, I didn't even hear you say it, you know? So it's interesting that you say that, because I could be very critical of myself on the podcast to strive for the sense of excellence and not to delete a quote out of my verbiage, you know? So I just have to laugh about that. But my question for you, I mean, you have achieved incredible success, dual board certified physician, and also now TEDx speaker. And so my question to you, with really achieving the top in literally everything that you're pursuing, is there ever a time when you catch yourself with that, perfectionism is starting to creep in? How do you maybe release that now that you've had this journey to reflect?
You're incredibly kind, Courtney, for saying that to me. And all of those things, just in full disclosure, yeah, it's a decision that I think I've done enough, or I am doing enough. That's a constant recommitment still, whatever phase anybody reaches, in terms of their definition of success or the world's definition of success. For me, the most powerful practice is the ability to slow down. And so when I share in my TEDx talk, the framework is titled The Courage Bridge. And in the Courage Bridge, the first thing I invite everyone to do, because that's what it requires massive bravery to decide, well, I'm not going to show up from a space of fear and this external persona that's just so polished. The first step is the courage to notice, the courage to examine your intentions. And you cannot examine your intentions when you're running at 1,000 miles per hour, which most of us feel. We are rushed, we are overstimulated, and we're pressured. And so, what I have found really powerful is to pause and witness. Metacognition is beautiful. When you are able to watch yourself think, it is critical, it is life changing. So, when I am able to just witness, oh, look, there I go again. Oh, look, here's my friend, inner critic, back again. I have another word, but I can't say that online for my inner critic. But there she is, back again. And the slowness of when the world makes you feel rushed, because that's what it is. When you feel not enough, that's a rush. I have to rush and I have to strive and I have to get that next vanity metric on my road to nowhere to make me feel whole at this point. And so breathe, stop. And I love embodied living, which is remembering that your body is right there with your brain that is going 1,000 miles per hour. So how can you step away? Whether is it just look outside there? We're lucky I'm in North Carolina. I can look outside and see beautiful fall trees right now, and something, a bird, a flower, something, a plant, something that is outside of your body is just so beautiful. So pausing and witnessing yourself, and then stepping away by taking a deep breath or whatever it is to slow yourself down and being in touch with what's happening around you.
Absolutely. And I do. I think I'm so happy that you bring up about just stop, pause, and being able to look in our surroundings and appreciate our surroundings. You're right. I mean, there's times when I'm just going 100 miles per hour, and it's like, you really do. You have to reflect, why am I going like this fast? Why don't I just enjoy life? Why don't I enjoy the things that are around me? Like, I spoke about this on a podcast once or twice, but where we live, it's in a residential area. You would never think there are like 15 deer out back, right? I love to feed deer. I probably shouldn't say that on this podcast, but I say this because there's something that's so beautiful when I watch them walk over, when I watch them get close, just to appreciate nature. And it's like, just the vision that I have, like from far away, it's appreciation. It allows you to reflect on your life and to just think, why do I have to go 100 miles per hour to that next like goal that's not even, is it my goal, or is it like I have to just achieve that next goal because other people are achieving. And so I think it grounds you. That's the word that came to mind when you were talking about like the bird outside, beautiful scenery in North Carolina, but it grounds you and it centers you back to what really matters in life. So I love that, Dr. Shabbir. I would love to round out this podcast episode. I was looking forward to this one because I could certainly relate to perfectionism. And so it's been an incredible, incredible journey, like diving into this concept. But could we maybe provide our audience with a positive message or a positive quote?
That question is so hard to answer, Courtney, because I am such a quotes person. So I will try not to overload the audience. But today, I think pertinent to our conversation, I would love to share two of my all time favorite quotes. I talked about courage. And so this is a quote from Maya Angelou. Courage is the most important of all the virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So that's the first one. The second is by Aaron Hansen. There's freedom waiting for you in the breezes of the sky, and you ask, what if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? And
I got chills on that one. I got chills on that one. Please, if you could just elaborate what that particular quote means to you in your life.
at the lowest point in my life, my friend, her name is Sarah, and she's wonderful, sent this to me. And she took a screenshot and she just texted it to me, and we worked in the same office. And it was a really low day, and I was operating from a space of fear, and the fear that I am falling apart on the inside, but the outside world does not know anything. And if I ask for help, like, I can't do that. Like, I can't do anything. I can't change my trajectory because I am here. This is where the checklist led me. All my degrees led me here, and I'm here. I'm supposed to stay here. I'm supposed to tough it up, suck it up, and just be here. And then she sends me this coat, and it was so expansive. It's just so beautifully written because it talks about the breeze in the sky. So first of all, and you're like in your dark office, you haven't seen sunlight in a long time. You're going I was working at that time and just seeing patient after patient after patient, and I was really worried that having the audacity to think differently and think like something could change. I was like, well, yeah, of course, if I try something different, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fail, and it's not going to be a perfect outcome. I could stay in the space of perfectionism, which was crushing me, or I could be creative or pivot or do something. And so the second part of the quotation, which is like, what if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? And I am so grateful to Sarah for sending this to me. And it just adds into the power of having friends that are there for you in those moments. And so, yeah.
I love what you said there. And it reminds me of how important it is to surround yourself with supportive people that uplift you, because you're right. I mean, to be able to share that moment with a friend, but then for them to say, what are you talking about? You've made it this far. Like, go for this. If your heart's calling you to go in this direction, because I've certainly had that happen before, where you're just about to take that step and then like, oh, stop, self-doubt creeps in. But then other people are like, no, you were talking about this. You were so passionate about this. You're going for this now, Courtney. So I absolutely love both of those quotes. But Dr. Shabbir, I am so incredibly grateful for your time spent today to share all of your wisdom. And once again, a big congratulations on this TEDx talk.
Thank you for having me, Courtney, for the opportunity and for sharing your positivity with me. This has been such a wonderful conversation.